Well, good day there teacher, good day there college. I'm going to make a paraphrase of the audiovisual material proposed for the last cut of the semester by the teacher Ivan Valenzuela. The following should be exposed as a preamble, a quick contextualization is made with the two of the philosopher and economist Adam Smith regarding the progressive transformation promoted by the Industrial Revolution in force in his time. Smith offered optimistic perspectives of the emerging industrial and bourgeois class. His inquiries result in the particular reason for the wealth of some nations. Smith assumes the success of these societies at the rate of trade and market expansion. Consequently, countries with these characteristics enjoyed opulence and the waste of their inhabitants was warranted. Even those belonging to the lower class of society. In relation to these arguments, Smith makes an apology for the new order resulting from the English Industrial Revolution, formulating that because of this, the poor and the population in general. After Smith, the two of Marx happens who, like the first author, is a philosopher and economist settled in the nucleus of the Industrial Revolution. Despite his intellectual affinity, Marx disagrees with Smith's optimism. Instead, he focuses on the negative consequences that the operant transformation brings in his time. In this regard, it must be cited that Marx developed his thinking in a more advanced context of the industrialization, namely in the second half of the 19th century, where it is easier to see the failures of the system. For example, the oppression established by the most powerful, in this case, those who owned the means of production, and the lands that had been stolen with violence and death. Marx did, Marx did not deny the advance in the means of production or in the technology linked to the force of economic distribution, but it was not his approach, which was focused on the transactional characteristics of the industrial transformation, specifically the state as essential problem, the increase in wage labor, and a fact that transforms the human relationship established so far, as well as those of property, including the whole set of institutionalized relationships in all spheres of society. Economy policies legal to the same individual it suppose a transversal change. This change given by the Industrial Revolution in the transition is the transition between feudalism and capitalism. It also means for Marx the institutionalization of the unjust socio-economic model. His thoughts are reflected in the work written in 1848, called the Communist Manifesto, one of the most famous and notorious literatures about his anti-capitalist ideas, closely involved in historical materialist philosophical thought, starting from the transforming notion and incident of history. In humanity, Marx visualizes the change that feudalism undergoes, and the order customary flattened for a long time, unleashing an industrial system that establishes a different social organization and creates two great social classes. To have a more accurate analysis of this process of transformation, it is necessary to clarify the conception that Marx had of feudalism. That is a typical pattern of social organization in which people are embedded hierarchically in society for lives, subjected to a status or hierarchically rank established indefinitely due to the natural type relationship that they undertook, so that such a hierarchical order could be distinguished the king as the highest instance, followed by the lords, below the knights, and as the base of the vertical column was the servants. It was a world where property was fully retained and individual or particular dominion was not granted. For its part, capitalism is defined by Marx as the creator of the absolute right to property, an idea that wipes out the order settled until then, allowing people to be seen as free and equal. Indeed, in Marx, the American and French Revolution are observed as root change in society, essentially determined by the bourgeois class, chance that allowed individual freedom to a king of bourgeois freedom. These principles of freedom and equality displace all the institutions of the feudal world, establishing a new capitalist order, established in the same way by relation of power or hierarchy, but this time between the two great new social classes engendered by the Industrial Revolution. That is, the bourgeoisie, owner of the properties of the lands obtained with violence and death from the peasants who once owned them and the means of production. And finally, the proletariat, devoid of the old good and concerned by the legislation to submit to the yoke of the factory for a wage, to reason for not being stoned to death as a beggar of tramp starving in a sewer. Marx observes capitalism as a system of exploitation, where the owners of the means of production and the land subdue those who have nothing more to offer than their labor power. Through a wage contract, a model is instituted that does not guarantee justice and legitimates the exploitation of man by man. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening.